All right, back on Southeastern 16 with Max Barr making our predictions for the other SEC basketball games on Saturday. Of course, you guys know how we do it sometimes. We like to put some in single videos, which we've already done with three of those: Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. And now we're going to cover the rest of the games, which means if you didn't hear your favorite team in that list, well, we're going to get to it in this one. And we're going to start with Tennessee at Vanderbilt. We go in order of tip-off here. Max, of course, the Vols had that loss, last week to Florida on the road, kind of caught everyone off guard. Or the week before now. I guess that's been a week and a half ago. But then it bounced back nicely, I think, with that solid win at Texas. Come back home, beat Georgia in a really, I thought good performance, specifically in the second half for Tennessee when you kind of had the offensive stretches they had with Ziegler and Gainey and so forth. But meanwhile, Vanderbilt, we said they had to get that win against South Carolina. They did, and now it kind of sets up a game where we said the gauntlet begins for the Vanderbilt Commodores here, and it starts with the Vols in Nashville.
Yeah, when we're talking about Vanderbilt's hopes at a tournament berth here, I think between the four home games, Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, and Ole Miss, those four big-time home games, I think they got to get two of them, and it would really make a big difference if they could just get a big one out of the way here early. I think we're going to get a spread around an 8-point favorite for Tennessee, give or take a possession. I think it's definitely going to be out above 6. And when you're looking at the matchup, Blake, the way that these teams play defensively, they like to slow you down. Both teams rank about slowest 50-ish defenses in the country tempo-wise. However, offensively, very big difference. Where Tennessee is kind of fine playing in the half court, methodical, Vandy wants to go. That's the big difference, just scheme-wise, that I'm seeing right off the bat.
Yeah, again, we talk about with Tennessee, I've mentioned before, it's just kind of one of those things where even in the loss at Florida, right? I mean, this is still a team that's just not allowing many points. Like Florida, yes, they scored 73, they beat them by 30, but it's not like Tennessee is the kind of team right now that we're just going to watch them go out and give up, 85 or 90 points. They just are not built that way. Now, if Vanderbilt does that, hey, you'll be the first team to do it this season because it just hasn't happened. Because we know Tennessee scoring defense-wise has been pretty terrific and still number one in the country in effective field goal percentage defense, number one in the country in three-point field goal percentage defense, which I think is certainly something when you kind of look at this game. I know that Vanderbilt is getting the lowest percentage of their points from three, only 29.8%. They're split, actually, Max. It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? From two in the free throw line, 145th nationally, both in those categories in terms of their point distribution. And they don't shoot a high percentage, but I do feel like this is one of those games, like if you're going to beat Tennessee, I feel like there has to be a path with getting and knocking down some open shots from the perimeter, which is always easier said than done. Because here's the problem I have for them, Max, is I think Okpara and Milicic are going to present some problems with their physicality in the paint. And we talked about Vanderbilt, the size disadvantage, those kind of things. I just wonder, right? Because we did just see Vanderbilt play a team like South Carolina. Colin Murray-Boyle is a big man who not afraid to bump you around, all those things. Yep. But I just think the pairing of a Milicic and Okpara here, that, and even Cade Phillips, right? Not even to leave him out of the mix. And we said Darlington Dubar's back, kind of been that rotation too. So, I mean, that's probably the biggest spot. If you're Vanderbilt and you're looking at this, like that's the biggest thing that makes you look up and say, how do we combat that element of this matchup?
Well, I think that's an element of the matchup where you're going to just have to concede. I really don't think they have the size. I mean, McLaughlin's going to do what he can. Carey's going to do what he can. But I think you kind of just go into this as a Vanderbilt fan thinking, okay, we're probably going to get out physical here. I would be very surprised if we win the battle of physicality. So where do you make up for that? You make up for it with steals. You make up for it with broken possessions. That's something that Vanderbilt can do. And as good as Ziegler has been, as amazing as he's been, his turnover rate is a little bit higher than years past. Doesn't really have a secondary guy like Santi Vescovi had been. They do have Gainey and Lanier, but the turnovers have been a little bit higher for the Vols than in years past. And on the road, if you're looking for ways that Vanderbilt can chip into this thing, say they're down, Vandy's down 12, and there's 15 minutes left. How do they get back into this? MJ Collins hits a three. Next possession, you get a steal, run out, boom. There's 5 quick ones, and you got a little bit of confidence. I think they're going to have to lean into that, Blake.
All right, let's make our picks. I'm curious to see if either one of us skip bold here and pick the Commodores, but it's a tough matchup, right? This is, we say it's like a road game for Tennessee, but let's call it what it is. There's going to be a lot of Tennessee fans in that building, so not going to feel like an actual true road game probably for the Vols. Not to say there won't be Vanderbilt fans there, but it's just the way it works in Nashville. So, picks.
Yeah, if Vanderbilt had a little bit more physicality and they had a little bit more rebounding, I would really be looking to take them here at home. It's just because of how nasty they can be in the backcourt defensively. I feel like they can cause some problems, get the crowd into it. We've seen the Tennessee offense kind of sputter lately, but I don't think they can match that physicality over 40 minutes. And so I'm gonna go Tennessee here, but I think Vandy can do some stuff defensively to frustrate Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like you said, I think forcing turnovers is certainly the name of the game here in this one. There's no question about it that they've got to force some turnovers in order to get those easy baskets, because that's the thing. If you're playing Tennessee, easy baskets are hard to come by, and
Yep.
I think that's the difference here. I'm going to pick Tennessee too, but like you said, if Vanderbilt's able to get out early, rattle Tennessee a little bit offensively, get that turnover number up to, I don't know, 10 or something, maybe at halftime, something like that,
Yep.
then things get a little interesting at that point, but it is hard to pick against the Vols in this, just from the defensive, and I think the physicality with Milicic and Akpara may be the difference in this one. All right, on to the next game, which, by the way, Chris is also picking Tennessee. I think Max the proxy vote here. So, yes, Chris picking Tennessee. So, all right, on to the next one. This one is 3 p.m. Central Time, ESPN2. Texas travels to Gainesville to play Florida, and we know this is kind of an interesting matchup now. Florida's coming off the home loss to Missouri, which was, I think, a bit surprising to most people, based on the fact that what we had seen Florida do to that point. Just had the home win against Tennessee, a week earlier, and then to come back and lose a home game to, Missouri just found a way to beat them. That's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth, I think, of the Florida Gators heading into this one. And for Texas, we said that was a must-win situation at Oklahoma. They go on the road, they get that, keep the streak going against the Sooners. And so now you get off to Schneid in the SEC, a nice win for Rodney Terry's team. And I think that's the thing, Max, is even at 1-3, it feels like Texas has been kind of a team after that A&M game. Played well for the most part against Auburn, played well for the most part against Tennessee, just came up short, 5-point, 4-point, respectively, losses in those games. So it feels like Texas is kind of one of those that they feel better than their record to this point, just based on kind of the way they're trending. And meanwhile, Florida, it's just how do you bounce back from that home loss to Missouri?
Yeah, Texas is definitely, I think they're one of the, if you lined up all the 12-5 teams in the nation, you ranked all the 12-5 teams, Texas would be up there. I mean, they've got 5 losses, and the worst one is against 31st ranked Ohio State. That's the worst of their 5 losses. So I think the record is a little bit deceiving, and that always comes into play when you're talking about a spread situation. I think this is going to be about somewhere around 10-ish. Would be surprised if it's out above 10. I honestly am expecting something more like 8-ish, 9-ish point favorite for the Gators. But when you look into the matchup, man, I don't really think either team has too much of an edge in any category, maybe except for Florida's offensive rebounding and kind of their just relentless pursuit of rebounds. As tall as Texas is, they don't really clean up the defensive glass, and they don't really hit the offensive glass as well as you would think. And against a Florida team that we saw what they could do physicality-wise, although Missouri just matched them pretty well, I think front court, Blake, is where I'm really seeing an edge in this one.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that was the story coming into the season, right? It was, we talked about, if you had your questions with Texas, you were going to bring up the front court first just to see how it all played out. And we kind of said the same thing about Florida, where we were like, all right, their guard group's going to be as good as anybody's in the country. What does that rotation look like in the front court? Well, now we've been pretty impressed by what they've been able to do, to this point. But I think it is fair now when you look at a couple of these performances, right? For Florida, defensively, you give up the 106 to Kentucky. You look at Missouri come out and just got off to a great start in that game. Now, some of that was just Caleb Grill being Caleb Grill, and just knocking down shots at a rapid rate there. But still, I think you're going to look at the overall numbers, and that's going to be something that stands out for people, I believe. And so, yeah, like this is one where I think if you're Florida, like you said, they're going to be a significant favorite probably in this game, but you do look at the way Texas is playing, and if you can kind of see them come out early, get some of that confidence, hit some threes. We've talked about kind of our thoughts on the 3-point shooting numbers for Texas, but still, right? I mean, look at what they're capable of. I think offensively, and knowing that you do have the kind of team that there's some playmakers who can make big plays, and I think that's where we're seeing guys like a Pope step up. Against Oklahoma. Yep. We know what Trey Johnson can do. We've always talked about our guy Tremont Mark, who's seemingly, starting to maybe get a little bit back into a groove here. Played well against Oklahoma, 33 minutes in that game. So it is one of those, Max, where I'm kind of like, man, I know Florida's going to be a big favorite, but didn't we just have this conversation against Missouri? And this is kind of a Texas team that I think is certainly trending in the right direction. So it makes for an interesting matchup here. We can get into picks. You can go ahead and make your pick and kind of give your additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, the thing about Florida is they've had 2 games now where the other team just has a guy just have a night. It was Grill and Brea. And Texas has got a few of those guys that can do it. I mean, but just between Pope, Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, and Kaluma, any of those 4 guys is so capable offensively of having one of those nights. So if you're a Florida fan, you just got to be like, just please, can we just
give us a team that has somebody who can't shoot?
So defensive effort for Florida is going to have to be very focused. Texas is playing some confident basketball. I give the front court edge to Florida, and honestly, I think this is such a close matchup when you look at what these teams do well, that I'm honestly kind of leaning into Kendall Weaver not being available and picking Florida here. I think in a game where Florida's going to bring in Aberdeen, bring in Tommy Hawk, that it never stops, constant. I feel like Texas's bench might be the difference and where it's not able to match Florida's. So I'll take Florida here, but man, Texas is playing confident, Blake.
It's one of those situations where, you never kind of want to have a get your attention type game as a coaching staff, but sometimes when you have a get your attention type game, it's important, especially when the other team also seems to be getting into form here with Texas.
Yes.
And so I think that's the setup for Florida. It's the double whammy of they're coming off of a disappointing home loss. Let's call it what it is, the top 5 team. And now you get more focused by the fact that Texas just went in and beat Oklahoma. So if it's different, right, you may just say, all right, we're looking up at an 0-4 team. But guarantee you, that coaching staff is like, hey, they're 1-3, but look at the way they played against 2 of the best teams in the league and in the country. So I think Florida will come out a bit more focused here, really trying to lock down the perimeter, as we said. And I think the front court as well is probably the difference. So I'm picking Florida in this one too. Chris, I'm going to assume Max also picking Florida.
Yes.
All right. A lot of Southeastern 16 kiss of death already. We may have a quick clean sweep here. We'll find out. All right. South Carolina at Oklahoma, also at 3 p.m. Central on ESPNU. Yeah. This is a battle of who's going to get off the Ofer streak, right? Oklahoma, 13-0 start to the season. They're 0-4 in SEC play. South Carolina has had a couple close calls, as we know. Back-to-back 66-63 games, one to Vanderbilt, one to Auburn. So, Max, that, again, must-win scenario for both of these teams here. We know South Carolina's further down the line in terms of their NCAA tournament expectations, but for Oklahoma, you You start 0-4, you lose a game like this. All of a sudden, you went from being a team that was around that 6 range, maybe at 13-0, to maybe being a team that's about to drop out of the field if this happens.
Oh, this one is just absolutely massive. This is just absolutely massive. You get the feeling that whoever loses this game, that might be it. You know, you drop this one, and it's not it because you got a million opportunities still, but the margin of error just gets real thin if you drop this one. That being said, I really think South Carolina has some things they can do well in this matchup. I think if there's one thing you want South Carolina to be able to have going into a game, it's consistency of rim production offensively, and that's something that Oklahoma just does a poor job at. They don't have the beef down low, and when you're looking at percentages defensively, they rank 282nd. This is the Sooners, 282nd in 2-point percentage defense, 6th in 3-point percentage defense. I mean, they are lights out on the perimeter. But once you get inside that perimeter, there's not much resistance. And that's perfect for a South Carolina setup here.
Yeah, I look at this one too, and I'm just like, I know what Oklahoma's done to this point, but look at how stingy South Carolina has been.
Yeah.
These past couple games, and it does feel like, again, that can go in one of two ways. They can either keep that going, or it's like, man, it's just, here we are, we're 0-4, right? It's just, but Oklahoma, as we said, is kind of in the same position. And so, I think this is, it's a big matchup, like you said. What can that front court, what can Colin Murray-Boyles do in this game? And just what do we see from Oklahoma after, again, some disappointing performances? But, it's also, too, look at Oklahoma's last 3 games, right? Lost by 2 at home to A&M, lost by 4 at home to Texas, which I know they were down 23 or whatever, but they wound up making it a game. They lose by 10 on the road to Georgia, who we mentioned as, back-to-back home wins over Kentucky and Oklahoma. So it's like they've also been right there. Like, a couple things go their way, and we're having a different discussion about Oklahoma. So it does feel like 2 teams that, in terms of like the margins right now, it's stylistically there are some similarities maybe in terms of like kind of the way things are trending, but still, as you said, I think can South Carolina kind of dictate the game the way they need it to be here. If they can, that certainly puts some pressure, I think, on Oklahoma.
And where does Oklahoma do their damage? 3-point line.
Yep.
Who doesn't let you shoot threes?
South Carolina does not. Yeah.
15th in the nation in opponent 3-point rate. We're talking about fewest. All right. They do not let you get shots up from outside. And when we're talking about, just real quick, injuries, I believe we're still going to be without Jamari Thomas and Miles Studi for South Carolina. So it doesn't look like it has impacted them all too much, but it definitely is. It definitely is. They would like to have those guys, no doubt about it. However, without them, they've lost by 3 to Auburn, 3 to Vandy. So,
yeah. All right. I'm curious here. Curious to see if anybody's going out on a limb when picks.
I think it's a great matchup for South Carolina. I really do. But when you look at Oklahoma's schedule, they were 2 points away from – they lost by 2 to A&M, lost by 4 to Texas. And I know there was a big lead, but Oklahoma got that thing down to like 2 with like 10 minutes left. Like for the last like 10 minutes of that game, it was pretty close. Oklahoma's a few possessions away from being 2-2. I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but they're a few possessions away. 4-point game, 2-point game, away from being 2-2 in the SEC, firmly with zero worry about this team. They're just off. You got South Carolina, a few possessions away from beating the number 1 team, Auburn, beating Vandy, being on a 2-game win streak. You don't have any angle there. When in doubt, go with the whole team. Zero confidence. Going Sooners, though.
Same thing. I'm going with the home team here. I think this will probably be closer than people think, just based on what we've seen South Carolina do, but I think there is something to the idea that, like you said, and it's the same for South Carolina, I get it, but Oklahoma's the home team. A couple of different bounces go their way. We're having a different conversation right now, and maybe those bounces finally go their way in this one. So I'll take the Sooners. Chris?
Sooners.
Oh, boy. We are setting up for a Saturday here. 2 more games to go. Arkansas at Missouri, 5 p.m. Central on the SEC Network. We all know the story of this one. Arkansas is 0-4 in SEC play after dropping the game at LSU. Here's another team. Their last 3 games lost by 7, 8, and 4. So, margin for error. Missouri knows all about that because that was kind of the story for Missouri last season. But this season it's been a different story because now they are streaking still, 3-1 in SEC play. Got the road win at Florida, and coming to this game feeling about as good as they have all season probably for the Missouri Tigers against an Arkansas team that's probably feeling about as low as they felt all season. So that's your setup for this game in Columbia.
Yeah, getting right into the matchup. What do we always say with Missouri? Turnovers and free throws. Turnovers and free throws. Guess what? The Arkansas offense has looked phenomenal lately, and they don't turn it over at all. Joking. They have not looked awesome. They do turn it over. And that plays right into Missouri's hand. Talking about free throws. Arkansas offensively, 257th nationally at free throw rate getting to the line. Missouri, second. Absolutely night and day. I think the 2 biggest things that Missouri does, forcing turnovers, getting to the free throw line, I think they comfortably win both battles.
Yeah. I think when you're talking about can you get easy offense against Arkansas, who sometimes has no idea how to get easy offense. And if you're the team that can get more of that, I think that is certainly a significant matchup advantage. If you're able to get easy baskets, where again, I mean, let's just call it what it is. I don't know how many easy baskets Arkansas has gotten in SEC play so far, right? I mean, how many times has it just looked completely smooth and like we're like, oh yeah. There's been a couple stretches maybe, but like it just hasn't been consistent. And you look at the scoring totals, right? And this is what we talk about with Arkansas. They played, they've had some tough defensive matchups when they played Tennessee, Ole Miss to start things off. I mean, those are just ridiculous defensive teams. But 52 points, 66 points, 63 points, 74 points. That's your output so far for this Arkansas team. And now I think you're going to get Missouri, as we said, who has done a much better job of consistently scoring the ball this season. They're shooting it better. They're forcing those turnovers, as you said, and they're at home. And guess what? We've seen from home teams in the SEC the ability to get to the free throw line. And we know Missouri will do just that. 14th in the country and getting 24.2% of their points from the line. I guess we can make our picks, because I just think there's a lot of things in Missouri's favor here.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that Arkansas does have going for them, Missouri is not the best team at protecting the rim. I mean, they're not bad, but that's definitely a weaker point that they have. In Arkansas, I think like Thero, I think he can get going. Maybe Boogie Flan in some mid-range, but I do think Arkansas could have some success inside. That being said, this feels like automatic Missouri win in your mind when you first look at it. Missouri at home coming off that big win. Arkansas has not played well. The spread's going to be like 5 or 6. I mean, it's going to be under 10, 100%. It's going to be under 10. It's not going to be double-digit spread. And so anytime you have a public feeling that this is an easy game to pick, not a shadow of a doubt in my mind. Look at how they've played. But then the odds say, this thing's pretty close to 50%. Maybe one team's more like 55, 60, but not much more than that. The alarms start going off in Max Barr's head. This is not good. This is not good. Public's going to be way too much on a team that they don't deserve it with what the math is saying. Well, I hate math. Give me the Tigers of Missouri to win this one at home.
That's a t-shirt coming soon. It's Southeastern 16. I hate math. Sponsored by Blake and Max, because we know how we think of math. Chris, I think, is the opposite on that. But look, this is desperation mode for Arkansas.
They're going to fight.
Everyone has written them off. Like, to me, this is the defining game. I know everyone looked at the LSU game as sort of the defining game. I think this is the defining game right here. Because I don't know that everyone has sort of written them off before the LSU game, right? Because you're like, okay, they're 0-3, but look at the teams they played. So they can figure this out. I was one of those. I'm like, hey, if they can just win one of these road games, then they got back-to-back winnable home games, I think, against Georgia and Oklahoma. So now everyone, though, is like, they lost to LSU, they're done.
Yes.
I think that would worry me a little bit if I'm Missouri, because I know it's not looked pretty for Arkansas. And I know offensively they have not been great, but I do think they can do some things defensively here to maybe frustrate Missouri a little bit. And if you think about the emotional aspect of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Missouri's coming off a huge high of winning a top 5 game on the road against Florida. And now they're playing a team that it does feel like, as I said, from a public's perception, all you've heard is that this team's done.
Yes.
Arkansas it's a must win spot for Arkansas. Arkansas has won 7 of the last 8 in the series, I think. But yet, like, we are at that point with the Razorbacks where until I see it, I can't pick it. So I'm picking Missouri.
Chris is also picking Missouri.
Oh, no.
I'll tell you what. When we
Oh,
come
boy.
back for this reaction on Saturday, I will not be surprised whatsoever if Arkansas wins this game. It's got the feeling of everyone's writing them off. There's going to be like 90% of the money on Missouri's spread, and that's right when they get their big win. It feels I'm not doing my pick. I'm not changing my pick. I'm not. I'm picking Missouri.
Oh,
But man,
I know
oh
what you're
man.
saying. I'm with you on that. I think that
Okay.
this is a scary game for Missouri because of all the
Yes.
elements we talked about. But the fact is, if both teams play the way they played to this point, Missouri's winning this game.
Missouri's
I
better.
mean, there's no question. Missouri's just been a
Yes.
better team, and so basketball is about matchups. We'll see how it turns out for these two. All right, we finish up LSU at Texas A&M, 7:30 p.m. Central, SEC Network on Saturday nights. Yeah, Max, this one feels like a kind of game that's. I know LSU's coming off the win against against Arkansas, but the biggest question still is Wade Taylor's status. I think we don't know that as we're recording this, or do we?
I wouldn't be surprised if he played. I'm telling you, he was bouncing around last game. He's on his way back.
Well, that's the big story then, because A&M's lost 2 in a row. They've lost to Alabama and Kentucky. No shame in that, but I think that's clearly they're a different team with him. Let's call it what it is.
Yes.
I know they were able to go win the game in Oklahoma. I understand all that, but when he's on the floor, it's just a different dynamic. It's really hard to prepare for. So that to me is the story here. But I think probably the bigger story is that Texas A&M defensively has still, I know, given up some points, but I think matchup wise in this kind of game, to me, is where you have a team coming on the road who's not been a great offensive team this season, and A&M's ability to get to the free throw line, I mean, is well documented at this point. And so those two things I don't really like for LSU in terms of this matchup.
I think this is a game where you miss Jalen Reed a lot. A lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because as much as I love Corey Chest and as much as Damian Collins is really playing well, Chest is a freshman. Damian Collins is a bit of a thinner big man, only 200 pounds. And then you do have Derek Fountain and Robert Miller, so you have bodies, but just I don't think they compare to Henry Coleman, Farrell Payne, Andy Garcia, Solo Washington. So I think that's going to be an issue for LSU. And then the other thing is defensively for Texas A&M, they are going to be raking at the ball, not going to let you get anything inside in the lane, and probably out of every SEC team, we have talked about turnover problems the most with LSU over the past year and a half. And that's just a nightmare going on the road to play A&M, where all they do is rake at the ball whenever you get inside the arc.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. If there is one thing I would point out here, remember, and different season, I know, but I always find these things fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Don't forget, last year to open SEC play, LSU goes on the road to play Texas A&M, and at that time, we're like, all right, come on, right? Come on. LSU goes in there and wins by 15 at Texas A&M. Solo Washington didn't play for A&M in that game, but give credit to LSU. So they've had some success in this building, but I mean we can get the picks, Max. I have a hard time coming up with that formula for LSU here, unless it is just simply that combination of Wade Taylor doesn't play again, the Aggies don't get to the free throw line the way they usually do, although that just feels like pretty much a lock at this point that they're going to get there. That's the only thing I can come up with here for LSU.
Pop quiz. What guard? So let's just say under 6'7". What player under 6'7" for LSU has a positive assist to turnover ratio?
Is it no
None.
one?
No one.
Wow.
No one. And guess who they don't have? Best freshman,
Oh,
Victorious Miller.
yep. I was
Rolled
about to
his,
say,
rolled
you're
his
right.
ankle.
Yep. So,
Okay. I think this is an LSU team that has just gotten really unlucky. You lose Tyrell Ward right before the season. You lose Jalen Reed. Now you don't have your freshman that was really having an underrated freshman season in a league that has a bunch of quality freshmen. He was right up there with the numbers that you put out. I just think it's unlucky. I don't think it's anything against LSU. I just think they're walking into a bad matchup here, very shorthanded. A&M.
yeah. Again, I think A&M losing back-to-back games is also in A&M's favor here because I don't really see them. We've said it; they've been very consistent this year. That's sort of been the surprising thing. If you look at the metrics, like they've been one of the more consistent teams. But it's like now you factor in without Wade Taylor. That's brought in a little more of that unpredictability. But
Yep.
I just think A&M at home here. I feel like the matchup is in their favor, and so I will also pick A&M, and I'm going to assume Chris is going to do the same thing.
Yep.
The Southeastern 16, kiss of death on every single game in this one. Who's it going to be? Who is going to be the team that gets the wrath of it? We'll find out. Of course, we did also do that. Somebody's going to. We did it for another game. There are only 2 games I think were split on this weekend. So you can check out the other videos. As we said, guys, Alabama, Kentucky, Auburn, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Check out our thoughts on those on the channel. And as always, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. We'll be going live on Saturday, as usual, reacting to everything that happens in SEC basketball. We appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you soon. Southeastern 16.